Very cool. All right, sweet. So I got a few, but one that stuck out to me was a trip that we took a few years back, and we had gone to the Outer Banks, which we've done frequently because my wife grew up in the area. And so we go back and we spend time on vacations with family in the area. And usually we rent a house. We all pack into the house together, and that's not what I regret, although it's never very pleasant, but it's fine. We power through. And so, but it was pretty stressful. And so we were thinking, man, I don't know, we've been there a week, and it wasn't as relaxing as we wanted it to be. So I was like, well, between here, North Carolina and Vermont, we could probably stop at a few beaches along the way and maybe get some of that back. And so we decided we'll stop at Rehoboth Beach in Delaware. I don't know if any of you have been there. It's a nice little seaside beach area. And so we looked quickly on Airbnb the night before and like, hey, can we just find a quick place near the beach and just kind of hang out, see something new, and just have some private family time with just our kiddos and just have a great time together. And so we just did a quick search, found one about a mile or two from the beach, and decided, hey, we'll do it. It was an apartment, which we do not typically do apartments for multiple reasons. One is just I don't prefer having all my family packed into one small apartment. Two, it can get, you never know what the neighbors are going to be, right? And so that was the situation we ran into. I was like, we got in the house, we got everything set up. We were like, okay, this is great. We got some food, and everything seemed pretty cool at first until we found out fairly soon that the neighbor, like right next door to one of the neighbors on either side, was on night shift, and so their whole schedule was different from ours, and those walls in those apartments were not very thick. And so our whole time of peaceful relaxation to recapture the stressful time that we had at the beach in North Carolina was totally ruined. We had no peace. We had no rest. It was all just completely crazy. So after 2 miserable nights, we just called it quits, and we just headed home and said, forget it. It was like the worst vacation time we'd ever had. And I immediately regretted it. I was like, we should have just went back to Vermont. It would have been more peaceful back home than it was trying to squeeze this other thing in. Right? So we definitely regretted that one. But regrets, relocation, all these things that we always, I think, go through. If you haven't gone through it, you will at one point in your life. What's going on here in the life of Jacob now? You see through our story, if you've been watching or following along with us through this series, we've been starting with how Jacob was forced to leave home. And then after 20 years is called back home by God. And through that homeward journey, we've seen him change. We've seen him face challenges. We've seen him face his past with his manipulative father-in-law. We've seen him wrestle with God. We've seen him reconcile with his estranged brother. And today, we're going to see him do something that he regrets and see how God calls him out of that and changes him through that process as well as we wrap things up in this story. So as you do this with me, let's go to chapter 35 of Genesis. If you have a Bible, if not, it's going to be up on your screen, but we always encourage if you have it, because you don't need to take my word for it. You can read along, because it's there in black and white. So feel free to open up on an app or your physical Bible or read along as we go through it. As you're doing that, I want us to jump back into the story part of this and remember where we are. So if you remember back to last week, Jacob had reconciled with his estranged brother Esau by the river, right? And they worked things out, they hashed things out, they hugged it out literally, right? And so they're by the river and everything's great and tears are flowing. It's an amazing time. And Esau goes back to his home and Jacob takes off. And he goes southwest and he goes over some hills and he's heading back to the land that he grew up in. His tribe moves slowly as they go down the valleys and they settle near a place called Shechem, which is a town that his grandfather Abraham had come to over 100 years back. And Jacob says, well, this seems like a good place, right? So he buys land. He begins spreading out his herds and his family, which he had a lot of. And it seems like everything was going according to plan, right? He's called back to his home. He's safe and sound. He's got family. He's got dirt of his own. He's got everything you could possibly want. But unfortunately, things take a quick and an ugly turn near Shechem. Jacob's daughter, Dinah, goes into town one day and she catches the attention, because she was a pretty girl, catches the attention of this young tribal leader there. And this boy, he was super impulsive. He had no respect for these guys, these immigrants essentially that are moving in. And he sees this beautiful young girl in the market and he just takes her and he takes her to an alley and he rapes her. After that encounter, she runs back to her tribe in the fields and the news spreads quickly about what has happened and her brothers hear of it and they're furious. Now, if you don't remember, Dinah has a lot of brothers, all right? So if you had a protective older brother, maybe you know where she's coming from. She's got 11 other brothers, and they're going to fight for her honor, right? So they're furious as to what's happened to their sister, but they react a little bit differently than maybe we would react. It turns out the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree in this family. So instead of lashing out, they start to put a scheme together. They act as if they were going to work out this marriage agreement between not only Dinah and the boy in the town, but all the women in their camp to all the guys in this village. And so they said, hey, that's all right. We understand that we got very beautiful women. That's fine. Let's work this out. We can hash this out. There's one catch, though. We'll make a deal. We can marry each other. It'll be great. We'll be all one big happy family. But just one thing you got to do. One thing. Before you can move forward, all the men in the village have to be circumcised. Snip, snip, right? Just a little one. And so this isn't baby snip, snip. This is adult snip, snip, right? So this is like these are middle-aged guys, teenage, whatever. There's all this stuff going on. And surprisingly, the village elders and the men who were negotiating this deal said, sure, that sounds great. It's worth it. We'll do it, right? No problem. We'll get it done. We'll go do it right now. We'll go back and tell everybody. We'll take care of it. So they go back, and they convince every man in the whole town to be able to go through the procedure. And 3 days later, once every man has been snipped and everyone's very sore, as you can imagine, Jacob's son, they then sweep into town while everybody's at a disadvantage. They sweep into town, and they kill every last man in town. Every last one. And they carry off the women and the children and the proceeds, the whole thing. They carry it all back, and they ride back home thinking they've done a good thing. They've protected their sister's honor, right? And they're taking pride in their handiwork, and they go back and tell their dad. They said, look, Dad, we did it. We revenged our sister, your daughter. You know, we've got everything. We've made things right. They're never going to mess with us again. People are going to leave us alone forever. And Jacob doesn't say, good job, great job. No, he's furious. He is furious. Here they are. They just moved into town, right? They just moved into the fields around them, and now they're murdering the village. And so every tribe in the land, he's saying, man, everybody around us, we're not alone. There's people all around us. They're going to hear about what we've done, and they're either going to run us out of the land, or worse, they're going to come and kill us for what we've done. Because these people have friends, right? And so they're going to retaliate. There's going to be revenge. There's going to be this big cycle where it's going to be destruction, right? And Jacob's overwhelmed because he thought he had it all figured out. He said, I'll settle down, I'll breed more livestock, I'll gain more wealth, I enjoy my family, but now through this whole ordeal, everything's falling completely apart. He thought, man, I'm following God's plan, but what he was actually doing was settling for his. You see, he may be back in the land of his ancestors, but he wasn't home, because home is where God is. Years ago, when he had been afraid, and he had been on the run, he was running from his murderous brother then, he had rested one night, and he laid his head down where God was. And in that moment, he made this deal, if you remember. This was week 1. It's going back a little ways. Genesis 28, 20-22 said, then Jacob made a vow saying, if God will be with me and will keep me in the way I go and will give me bread to eat, clothing to wear, so that I may come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone, which I've set it for a pillar, shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, God, as he's making this deal, I'll give a full 10th back to you. So he makes this deal with God. Here in the midst of his fears, he's running away from his brother. In that moment, he makes this deal. You be my God, and then I will make sure I come back. I will build you a house, a temple, a sanctuary, and I will give back as a sacrifice, a full 10th of everything you've given me. And now here in the midst of fear of those around him looking to be on the run again, as he's in fear, wondering, what am I going to do? God shows up to remind him of that vow. It's chapter 35, verse 1. Here it is. God said to Jacob, arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there. Make an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. In other words, God is saying, what are you doing here? Why are you in Shechem? Why did you buy land there? Is that where I called you to go? You may be back in your father's land, but you're not home yet. Bethel, the place where this all started, God had done more than that deal that he had made with him. God had come through abundant in that, but Jacob hadn't held up his end of the bargain at all. And now he's a fugitive in his own land. He's got to run. Any allies of that village are going to be sure to be on the lookout for them, and he's got a decision to make. Does he stand and fight and maybe die, or maybe they win, who knows? Or does he follow through on his vow, on his commitment to God that he made 20 years before, and risk it and go to Bethel? Was he Jacob, the deceiver, tricking even God into what he wanted? Or was he Israel, the one who God fights for? So here's what happens in our journeys from and to home. Our journey of faith is one filled with wonderings, with fear, with failure, with doubt, with awakenings and reassurance, but also ultimately a remaking of ourselves. It's a breaking and a building process. And at this moment of Jacob's journey, he's brought to a point of decision. He's heard God, he's wrestled with him, and now he's called to make a commitment to the God who has done everything for him. Jacob is called to worship. Now, we can get confused with the word worship because we associate it with certain things like maybe music or singing, but biblical worship is this. Biblical worship is to give devotion to give all your love, everything in you, your whole being over, to place honor, respect, and reverence in obedience to the one who deserves all that we have. Worship is acknowledging and celebrating God's power and his perfection and gratitude for what he's done, what he's doing, and what he has promised to do in the future. You see, Jacob's journey isn't complete until he's kept his word to worship, to make God his God. Coming home means worshiping the God who has brought us back. Let's look at verses 2 and 3. So Jacob said to his household, and to all who are with him, he said, put away the foreign gods that are among you and purify yourselves and change your garments. And then let us arise and go up to Bethel, and so I can make there an altar to the God who answers me. I love this. I want to slow down. Let's go back 2 seconds. So that I may make there an altar to the God who answers me in the day of my distress and has been with me wherever I have gone. What an amazing statement. See, worshiping God, committing our entire lives over to him, requires us to do a few things, like Jacob's doing here. It requires us to cut ties with the past, to let things go, to lay things aside that isn't of God himself, to have a change of action and not just a change of heart, because a heart change should be followed by a change of action. Jacob not only separates himself from his past here, but as a leader of the tribe, he calls everybody to do the same. He says, hey guys, if you're going to follow me from now on, you can stay here and you can fight the people who's going to come against you in this moment. Or if you're going to come with me to Bethel and we're going to worship God together, you're going to have to lay down every single thing in your life that's not of him yourself if you're going to follow. If you're going to stay, you stay. You do what you're going to do. But if you're going to follow, it means you got to lay it all down. You got to put aside every other God you have. And you're going to have to all wash and change your clothes. He's preparing himself in worship and preparing his tribe and his family in worship. See, last time he stumbled into Bethel. He stumbled into God's house. And he was amazed and grateful for God's grace. But now he knows he's stepping onto holy ground, and he prepares accordingly. He's not just cleaning himself up to be accepted by God. He's already been accepted. He's changing his clothes to show others that he's ready to be the man that God has called him to be. So one by one, women, children, bring in their idols, their gods of protection, their gods of provision, and they lay them all down at Jacob's feet. And as they set out to leave, he takes this big pile of idols, these gods, these wooden and stone instruments, and he takes them over to a tree near the village and he buries them in the dirt. A symbol that they have no more power and authority in his life anymore. At this moment, he decides there's only one worthy of worship, and he isn't carved in wood and stone. Now, with that done, the camp sets out to Bethel. And Jacob gets to thinking. He gets to thinking about his mom, right? He was her favorite. His mom loved him. She always kept the best of the fruit and the honey back just for him to snack on during the day. Esau could fend for himself. She was going to take care of Jacob, right? He loved sitting by her as she was weaving her robes and her dresses and the tents and the blankets for the tribe. And he would listen every night as she sat by his bedside and told him stories that her father told her and her father told him. He would drift off to sleep with her fingers running through his hair. She watched 20 years ago as he left, but had to stay behind. And as all moms do, her heart broke as she saw him walk off. But she wasn't going to leave him unkept, untended. So she sent along with him her nursemaid to watch over and care for him and his future family, as her nursemaid had done for her all those years. And that lady's name was Deborah. She was a faithful, true woman. She had stuck with Jacob through thick and thin, 20 years, every wife, every birth, everything. It was the next best thing in Jacob's life to having his mother around. And he's looking around the camp that day as he's thinking about his mom, and he sees Deborah. She's older now. She's limping around the camp, old and frail, but she's still pushing on. And so he's watching her as they make their way up the hill to Bethel, and they get there, and as soon as they show up, news comes to him that she's sick. As they set up tents on the hilltop, as they make preparations for this long stay, he gets word as he's in the busyness of all this that she dies. He goes to her bedside, he closes her eyes one last time and carries her to a grave under an oak tree down the hill. Another piece of the past that he had is gone. Another reminder of his former life faded into memory. After a time of mourning, Jacob does what he came to do, which is to worship. So he walks over to the stone pillar that he had set up 20 years ago. It's still there right where he left it. It's worn and weathered, a lot like Jacob, but it's still standing. In humility, as he had done with his brother, he bows down and he prays. He pledges his life to the God who hasn't failed him in a single promise, the God who had been with him, the God who had protected him from Laban, the God who had changed he and his brother's heart, the God that had gave him daily bread of his own, new clothes of his own, and now a family and a home of his own. Now, not just in duty because he has to, but in devotion, Jacob gives his life in return. The stone marker is going to be a headstone for the temple of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he goes back and he honors his pledge to give a full 10% of all that God had given him. He gives back as he commits his life to God, his wealth, his family, his future, everything he lays at the altar. As he does so, God speaks to him again. God said to him in verses 11 and 12, he says, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall come from your own body. In the land that I gave to Abraham and Isaac, your father and grandfather, I will give to you, and I will give the land to your offspring after you. So as Jacob worships the God of promise, God promises more. He is the next in line that is going to continue for generations. Whole kingdoms, whole kings and princes and queens will come from his descendants in the land of all that they're surrounded in, the land that he is now in the midst of fear in because of the things that his family has done in it. They're not a great start. His land, the land that they're in, will eventually be theirs. Now this time, as Jacob hears this promise read over him, Jacob doesn't make a deal. He doesn't say, well, all right, God, if you do that, then great, then I'll do this. No, he's done with those things. He simply takes God at his word. And instead of waiting to worship when God comes through, he worships him knowing that God will come through. You see, coming home to God in faith means moving from thanking God when he comes through to praising God before you see anything change because you know that he will come through. See, a faithless life, a life that's without promises made and promises kept, without worship of the only God who does come through, is really unlivable. We do it, we stumble through it, but it isn't really living at all. It's just a slow death. It's a faithless life that breaks when tragedy strikes because all you have to go on is this vain hope of like, oh, well, I hope. I've talked to so many people that don't have any real hope in Christ and in God. And I talk with them and they're like, well, I know that I'm pretty certain my dad's in heaven. I'm like, well, I know where my dad is. Not because of I have a conviction just because I have a conviction. I have a trust in the God who takes care of his people who put their trust in him. And so if you don't have those promises made, promises kept, you don't have a trustworthy God to hold all your world together, your world falls apart when tragedy strikes. Now, thankfully, Jacob no longer has to make deals or hope he could figure things out on his own. He's been changed to trust the God that never fails. And that's a great thing because that faith was about to be put to the test. After committing his life to God and worship at Bethel, they break camp. And they begin to head to Hebron because word had come that his father, who was still alive, because imagine this, because 20 years ago, I told you, week one, I said that his dad was near death, right? And so here we are, 20 years later, he gets word that, hey, your dad's still alive. Isaac's still kicking. right? And so he's sick, though, and he's close to death, so you need to come see them. So they break camp at Bethel, and they go to Hebron because it's only a few days' journey away. And they go to see him one last time. As they're on the march, a few days' journey away, all these herds, animals, flocks, everything just caravan moving through, Jacob looks over at Rachel. He looks at his first love, who now is pregnant with their second child. Jacob was really set on doing his part about the fruitful multiplying part we mentioned earlier. He was really into that, so that's why he has lots of kids. So he's got his second child, right? And so all these years later, as he looks over her, as he's watching her ride on the camel, very pregnant, she's still taking his breath away. The baby that she was carrying was due any day now. Another son, hopefully, right? Another blessing from God that's going to one day inherit that land they're walking through as immigrants. So as they set up camp that night, everyone's looking at anticipation. When's the next son coming? And so they set up camp for the night, and Rachel's labor sets in. This is going to be number 2 for her. She always wanted multiple children like her sister. And years ago, she'd even said in frustration and envy that Jacob needed to give her children or she was just going to die from shame. Now, Joseph, her firstborn and her favorite, had eased that pain of hers, but another son would be even better. And as she's thinking about the joy of having another one, of holding another baby, another beautiful child, another contraction hits, and then another like waves on a seashore. And she remembers this feeling from last time, but the next contraction hits and something unfamiliar rolls over her. This pain strikes her that she's not quite sure of. This didn't feel the same as years ago. As she's thinking through what this means, the midwife's face goes pale and she sees how much blood Rachel is losing, but she knows we're close. She knows the baby's close. There's the head, right? And just one more push and there's the rest. And joy of all joys is another boy. It's the boy that she wants. She places that newborn gift on Rachel's breast, but she notices that the bleeding hasn't slowed down. She notices that Rachel's breath is ragged, it's shallow. Her face just this deadly white. And as Rachel herself clings to her newborn son, as she feels his heartbeat, as she hears his strong cries, tears begin to stream down her face. She kisses her child and says, "You are Benoni, the son of my sorrow and my strength. With my life, I give you yours." And then she breathes her last. Hearing the news, Jacob doesn't fly into a blind rage. He doesn't tear his clothes and sit in sackcloth and ashes as would have been appropriate for someone in mourning. He doesn't crumble in a heap of despair. He simply goes to her side, kisses her one last time, and builds an altar. Instead of succumbing to fear and grief, he worships God again, not understanding, but trusting that God's ways are higher than his own. Another door of his past, this time painfully, closes. He packs up camp slowly. They begin the march to his father's camp. He turns and he looks back at the graveside where his wife is buried. And he turns and looks forward to his father's home. He can't believe it. But after seeming to be near death 20 years ago, Isaac is hung on all these years later. So as Jacob and the tribe passes by these oak trees that he remembers his grandpa Abraham talking about, he climbs another hill. He gets to the top and sees his father's tents waving in the afternoon breeze. As he makes his way across, he spots his brother Esau coming up from the other side. And just as they had done before, they meet in the middle with their wives, their sons, their daughters, all gathered around. And the last time they had been at their father's tent, it had broken the family. They left in shame and fear. Everybody ran away from each other. Jacob had left, and Esau was fuming. And this time, though, they come into the father's tent united. The extended family follows behind the tribal leaders of Jacob and Esau as they cram into this tent to see Grandpa Isaac, a man they had only heard stories about. This guy was 180 years old, right? If you think you're old, you lived 180 years old. And they all come close because he's blind. He's been blind for years. So they all come real close so he can see and he can smell them. He touches each one. He brings them close in a hug and he breathes in. Yeah, these are his. These are his family. This is how it should be all together. Over 50 years had passed in his life since God had met him and promised him that from his offspring he would have a multitude. And he had 2 kids. But out of those 2 kids, now he sees, or doesn't see, he hears the many sons and the many daughters and the many grandkids. And even though he can't see it with his physical eyes, he sees with faith as he hears the cooing of young men, as he feels the rough hands of Reuben, the firstborn, as he hears the laughter of children and grandchildren all around him. God had done far more abundantly than he could have ever asked, thought, or imagined. This is what a blessing of God looks like. Tired, but content, with family all around him, Isaac takes his last breath. The twin brothers who are once separated over their father are now made whole by God. They reach down, they pick up their father's frail body, and they prepare him for burial and worship the God of Abraham and Isaac as they lay him in the tomb of his ancestors. You see, coming home means worshiping through the pain as a giving way of the past makes way for the future that's promised. So for believers this morning, can others tell your relationship with God by how you worship him? Now, what I mean by that is I don't mean can they tell by how loud you sing when we play worship music on a Sunday morning, or how loud you pray, or whatever outward, exterior form of worship you may associate with the word. What I mean is, can others tell that you have committed your life to him as Jacob did? And if you're not sure, what I want you to do is use these questions as kind of a checklist this week to either listen back to or read back or ask yourself each day. Here's how you know if others can tell. Are you obedient to what he commands in your life no matter how you feel about it? That's one. Are you taking time each day to simply sit and just be, listening for his word over your life? Are you giving your time, your talent, and your treasure back to him, recognizing you only have it because he's given it to you first? Are you leading others to him to experience the same promises and hope that you have? Are you praising him in the promises and in the pain? In other words, what does your worship look like? Your everyday, wake up, go through, go to bed, deal with your kids, deal with your spouse, deal with your grandkids, deal with your job, deal with work. All that is worship. How are you worshiping him in that? And can someone else look in your life and say, you're different than, because of that worship? For non-believers, Jacob's worship was a response to God working in his life. And here's the reality. We're all on a journey of faith. You're either going towards God or away from them. There's no in between. There's no I'm just here. No, you're either falling further away from God or you're drawing closer to him. In most of our lives, if we're honest, and I've been there, most of our lives are either spent in apathy towards God or just outright rejection. But there's markers along the way I've seen in my life, and I've heard in every story of every person I've ever talked to. Every single one. There are markers along the way where we can't deny that God is speaking to us and working in our lives. And if we lean into that, if we actually listen, if we obey, if we really worship in those calls, That's where we begin to experience lasting change. That's where we begin to experience lasting transformation in that response to his voice in worship, in devotion, in a commitment to him. You see, the good news, the gospel as we call it, says we're all sinners. There's nobody in here that hasn't messed up, done something wrong, made a mistake, has fallen short, the Bible says, of the absolute glory and perfection of God. And there's no way you could ever work your way to be perfect. We know that inherently. And so the good news is that although we all have sinned, we all walk away from God, God loves us just as much as he loved Jacob. And as he saw Jacob running away from a murderous brother, as he saw Jacob lying and cheating, as he saw Jacob trying to figure out ways and making things worse in his life, as he saw Jacob doing those things, he didn't walk away from Jacob and said, I hope you get it figured out. When you do, come and find me. He said, no, I'm coming and making a promise over you. I'm speaking promise over your life. You have an opportunity to respond to that promise. Now, for us, on this side of the cross, we know that in God in flesh is Christ, that he came to live the perfect, holy life we never can, to die the death that we all deserve. And he was raised to new life. He was resurrected, the biblical term is, to prove that he had conquered death. And he has the authority to give abundant and eternal life to whoever commits their life, places their trust in his nail-scarred hands. That's the hope that we have. That's how I know where my dad is, because I know where he put his trust. Because the love of God overcomes the sinner and draws us to him, calls us to the house of God, and says, come home. Our responsibility is to lay down our lives in thanks to the God who has saved us and live it in devotion to him from now on, and watch as he changes everything for the good. Let's pray this morning. If you're here today, you don't have to, but I ask just because. I ask you to bow your heads and close your eyes only because it's helpful for you to focus. That is not a requirement for prayer, but it helps. It helps you be able to reflect and actually listen to what God is saying. And so as the worship team is coming up, we're going to get ready to worship through song in just a minute. What we want to do is give you a chance of response, to be able to respond to the God who has loved you enough that he came and died for you to rescue you from yourself, to rescue you from your enemies around you, to rescue you from slavery, the word says. And so today, how you respond to God's invading, rescuing love is through worship, is through obedience, is through a simple, humble call back out to him. And it could sound like this. Dear Jesus, I need you. I've been stuck between away from home, but not quite back yet. And I've made some regrettable choices. I've had some things done to me and I've done to others that I'm not proud of, that I might regret. And I hear you today, that unexplainably, inexplicably, that you love me, that you see me in my failures and flaws, that you see me when I'm halfway back, not all the way back, still stuck in my mess. And you still call me home. You still remind me of the time you spoke to me when I was a kid. You still remind me of that time when I was stuck in a bad place and I didn't think there was any way out, but you rescued me then. And I said, if you took care of me, then I would come and I would worship you. If you just did what could nobody else could done, then I would know you're real. Then I would know I could come and worship you. Then I would give everything over to you, but I haven't done it yet. Life got busy. I got caught up. Things happened. But today, I hear you calling again. Today, I'm ready to come home. I'm ready to close the doors of my past to enter into the future you've promised. God, I thank you that through your Son, I have freedom. I have life abundant and eternal, that I am forgiven and I can forgive others, that my life is in your hands. And that's the best place it could ever be. I commit my life to you. If that's you, and you said words like that, they don't have to be those words. Something to that effect. That's step one. Step two is for you to come and find either myself, John, who plays the guitar up on stage, Chris and Catherine, who sit up very front here. Anybody you know that you even think they might be a believer, you need to find them. And you need to say, what happens next? Because this is just the beginning. Jacob's life didn't end at Bethel. It kept going to that chapter of his father where it was closed. It kept going past that where he would see his kids and his grandkids and their kids. And he would begin to see the promise unfold in his life. When you step into the promise of God through responding to him in worship today, you step into a journey of watching the promise unfold in your life. And so find someone today, if you made that commitment, who's going to walk with you. This church, we are here to walk with you as you expand and unfold and see God continue to work and speak over you. And yeah, it's going to be messy. Yeah, it's going to be weird. Yeah, it's going to be different. Yeah, you're going to have to talk to people and they're going to ask what happened and you're going to have to explain it and it's going to be awkward and all these things. But it's also worth it.